From a bright and sunny Atlanta, and good afternoon and good evening to our friends in China and in Europe. I'm John McIntyre at Georgia Institute of Technology, Scheller College of Business in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm here to introduce the event this morning, which is a book webinar on a new release by the Chinese Globalization Association, Inc., which is a private, not-for-profit academic research group incorporated in the state of Florida, which has been in existence since roughly 2004, looking at issues of Chinese economic globalization and the transformation of the Chinese enterprise form, among other topics. I am glad to say that this is the 8th in a series of books that have been published by members of the board of the Chinese Globalization Association. I'll name very quickly just a few: Business and Management Education in China, Globalization of Chinese Enterprises, China Rules, China's Belt and Road Initiatives, Huawei Goes Global #1, and then a second volume, Huawei Goes Global 2, looking at broader implications. Geely Drives Out, and finally, The New Chinese Dream, released a few days ago with Springer Nature out of Geneva, in a series edited by our good friend Marin Marinov in Denmark. So before I get started and say a few words about the book, let me mention that this is a book that looks at Chinese industrial and innovation policy, looking to 2049, which is the centennial anniversary of the creation of the Chinese state. We have been extremely interested in understanding and assessing where China is or is going, and what are its achievements in terms of using the tools of industrial policy, to really achieve these objectives. The book has 8 chapters, and this morning we have selected a few chapters to illustrate the contents of the book. We urge you to purchase the book. It can be purchased either in ebook format or in hard copy, and you can find it easily on Amazon. The full title is The New Chinese Dream. Before I turn it off to Francesca Spigarelli, my co-author and co-editor, I want to extend congratulations to Francesca on the opening of a new center, China Center of the University of Macerata in Italy, in wonderful villa, newly created Villa Lowry, which has been restored and has been inaugurated July 15th, just a few short days ago. It will house the China Research Center, the China Center of the University of Macerata. Without further ado, I'm turning it over to our colleague, Professor Francesca Spigarelli, who teaches industrial economics and runs the China Center with our colleagues at the University of Macerata, to be the MC for this event this morning, and we'll try and stick to time. Thank you very much. If you're not speaking, could you please mute your sound, because we're hearing some scratching sounds in the background. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And it's over to you, Francesca.
Thank you so much, John. So I'm very happy to open this presentation, this first presentation that is related to our book that I have here in my hands. It's been a nice job during the pandemic this year. So we started with the idea of gathering few contributions from the China Goes Global that was held last year in August, virtually in Shanghai with William Hua, the MD on Business School. And so we collected several contributions with this red line that is related to the role of industrial policies. So the industrial transition that China is experiencing towards this very important anniversary in 2049. So today we have selected 3 main topic. Later we can have other events to present the other chapters that are really interesting as those three that we have selected today. So today we are talking about China and digitalization, so the digital industry, the commercial aircraft manufacturing sector, and the life science sector. So we have three authors of chapters within our book and three discussants. The three discussants were chosen among the authors of other chapters that are quite related to those three that we have selected today. So we can give the floor to the first speaker, Dominique Joly from University, and he will have 12 minutes, around 12 minutes, and then we can have 5 minutes discussion. After the three presentation of the three chapters, we will have a Q&A section where we can talk and discuss about these sectors and related industrial policies. So I give the floor to Dominique Joly, presenting this first chapter of our book.
Thank you, Francesca. Thank you to John as well for the introduction and for giving us the opportunity to be here this afternoon. I mean, I'm talking about Europe, okay? So yes, the question is about the future. I mean, how can China develop the digital world? I mean, the fact is that today it's obvious that China has been able to accomplish interesting things in this domain of the digital world. Now the big question is, will they be able to develop outside China? So this is my view is that it's going to be probably difficult to go outside the boundaries of China. But before discussing about this question, I would like to give a picture of what's the situation today. And in order to give this picture, the first thing I have to do is to say a few words about what we call the national system of innovation. And regarding this national system of innovation, we have a situation which is obviously very impressive. Why? Because China has been able to bundle, to assemble all the ingredients which are necessary in order to foster technological innovation. So, I mean, now you have the right universities, you have the right research centers, you have science parks, I mean, you have startups, you have unicorns, you have companies which are devoting a significant part of their budget to R&D. You have foreign companies which are doing R&D in China. So it is clear that today we have a situation which is quite acceptable. And I mean, all what is needed to do some innovation, to accomplish some innovation is here now. If we look more precisely to the case of the digital world, we have something which is also very interesting. We have some big companies. John was mentioning the case of Huawei. I mean, all of us, we know Huawei. We know it's originally a B2B company. And then this company diversified into the B2C. And probably, I mean, most of the people around the world, they know Huawei because of the smartphones much more than the equipment. But regarding the equipment, okay, as an equipment manufacturer, we have a company which has been able, obviously, to be quite good regarding the 5G. Not only, I mean, we don't have only Huawei, we have also this company, Xiaomi, which is producing smartphones, okay? I mean, this company is about 10 years old. started from scratch, okay, and now they produce even more than 100 million smartphones per year, okay, it's quite impressive. And then you have BAT, so I mean Baidu for the search engine, Alibaba for the e-commerce, and Tencent for games, and Tencent also for messaging and WeChat, okay. You have also companies like Jingdong, Pinduoduo, Yihaodian, which are companies which are in the retail industry. You have companies like Weibo, Didi, ByteDance, and so on. So you have those big companies which are investing a lot in R&D and which are doing quite well. We have also startups, and I would like to mention a few startups like Zhong'an in the insurance business, iFlyTime, SenseTime, Hikvision, Megvii, all those companies which are in fields related like AI, I mean artificial intelligence, IoT, Internet of Things. So once again, in a very broad picture, the national system of innovation is doing quite well. And in this area, you have a subdomain, which is the digital industry. And here, I mean, we have also some significant players. And China has been able to do this because it's an entirely new industry. So it's quite different from the car industry. For the car industry, I mean, companies in Europe, companies in the US, companies in Japan, companies in South Korea are well established. So it's going to be a bit more difficult to challenge companies in the car industry. But in this industry, digital, this is brand new. So everyone is starting from scratch. So there are some opportunities for China. That's my point number one. Point number two, how can we explain this success of China? And here I would like to mention four explanations. The first explanation is obvious. That's what we call leapfrogging. Why? Because in fact, China, I mean, I'm using a computer for this conference, but most of the Chinese people, they switch very quickly to the smartphone, okay? So they haven't had to invest into a computer. So making things quite easier to use. That's explanation number one, leapfrogging. Explanation number two, protectionism. Protectionism, I mean, there is a clear policy from the Chinese government, which is to exclude US companies. So US companies were not allowed to enter into China. And that's probably one of the main reasons why Chinese companies have been able to develop. And reason number three, I mean, you have the size. I mean, that's always the same story as soon as you talk about China. You have an advantage for size, okay? I mean, I'm working in Switzerland. We are 8 million in Switzerland. Okay, I mean, it's impossible to compete on size. I mean, 8 million is nothing for China. I mean, think about Weibo. I mean, WeChat, sorry. WeChat, I mean, this is about 1 billion monthly users. Okay, so that's really a high number. And explanation number four, Chinese companies, they do not need to localize, okay? They do not need to localize. So, I mean, because they know the demand, they know the differences between the different parts of China. So immediately they have been able to deliver something which is fitted to what the Chinese consumer is looking for. Okay, and I think it would be much more difficult for foreign companies. Yet, so you have those four reasons, but I would like to mention that there is a strong limit which is related to the semiconductor industry, because in the semiconductor industry, Let me put it bluntly, because we don't have too much time. Sorry, because I'm not going to be very nice. But I think China is not doing well today, at least today, regarding the semiconductor industry. So, you know, I mean, 95% of the semiconductors are imported from different countries, including the US. Last point, okay, and I need to be on time. You have many possible applications in the future. So in those domains, there is probably some possibilities to expand outside China. Inside China, you have one thing, which is productivity increase. I mean, productivity is not very good in China. So investing in digital is obviously one way to improve. You have also one opportunity for driverless cars, because once again, driverless cars is a business where all the companies around the world, they start at the same level, okay? You have also an opportunity in the future with smart cities. You have an opportunity which is very linked to China, which is related to elderly people. I mean, old people, people who retire. Here you have some possibilities to develop new businesses, because the proportion of people who are more than 60 years old in China is really going high. Could be 24, 25% in the future. So you need to assist, you need to give support, and digital could be one way. Public health is also an opportunity. The e-Renminbi, I mean the e-yuan, is also an opportunity. So you see, in all those applications, you have a few applications like driverless cars, like smart cities, which are possibly one way to develop outside China. Last point, very last point.
1 minute.
Yeah, in 1 minute, I will do it. We have a few issues which are raised. I mean, I'm not sure countries will be open to let China develop outside China, especially because there is a lack of reciprocity. Okay, that's one. And two, I mean, Chinese people that are used to the control of the internet, they are used to censorship. We are not so used to that, okay? So there is a risk, because people in Europe might be afraid of having this type of behavior exported to Europe. And last thing, I mean, in the same atmosphere, this is a social credit system. And once again, I mean, it's quite easy to export from a technical point of view, but from a societal point of view, I don't think it's possible. So my very last sentence is a sentence of a European guy, and I'm just to tell you that I'm a bit afraid. I'm a bit afraid because I'm afraid that we are going to be squeezed in Europe between two things. Okay, I mean the US on one side with the GAFA, GAFA. And on the other side, BATX coming from China. So here, that's the perspective which is not so nice. I'm going to stop here. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dominique. Really on time and very concise, but very effective. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So your book is about, is China going to run the digital world? So you gave very strict answers and question marks about the future development of this industry. So to comment your chapter, we have asked Peter Enderwick from New Zealand to give a comment, because he's author of the chapter related to Chinese innovative capacity, state of the art of the leading edge. Unfortunately, I don't see Peter online unless he is connected with another address, maybe. So Peter, are you there, Peter? Maybe he had some problems because he had confirmed right yesterday that he would have joined. So I would, John? You were about to speak.
Yeah, Well, New Zealand is a long way, but
It's
I would have some comments to make on Dominique Joly's presentation. You mentioned I'm particularly puzzled by the European Union and Europe at large being caught between two demanding geopolitical powers in the field of digitalization, Chinese industry, Chinese standards, and the US. And I was wondering how you feel it will play out. What will the European Union do in terms of coping with these cross currents of perhaps conflicting demands? That would be my first question. And then you mentioned that one of the advantages that China might have, and I may not have understood that right, is that it does not have the issue of localization. That is to say that it is addressing a national market of 100 billion users of digital modalities without having to think about issues of localizations, which are traditional issues for any Western or Japanese or other multinational enterprise. I wonder if you could say a few words about these two issues here.
Yes, thank you, John, for the question. So for the first question, that's an issue for Europe, okay? And my point of view is very clear. I think we have been extremely good at developing the European community for agriculture, for different domains, okay? For the currency, I mean, now we have this currency all over Europe. But we are not good at making, let's say, we do not have a Ministry of Science and Technology at the level of the European community. And we miss this, okay? So if we are able to do so, probably we have Thierry Breton, but Thierry Breton is not so powerful, okay? And we need one structure which is more strong, okay, stronger to organize, because I mean we have many resources, okay. We have many resources in Switzerland, in Europe, in France, in Germany, in Italy. I mean, we need to articulate those resources, and I think this is not strong enough. Okay, the power is not strong enough, and what we need is someone one organization to coordinate. Okay, the different efforts, and in that case, I think I would be more comfortable. So that's for your first question. For the second question, yes, you're right. I mean, I did a research a few years ago when I was at CIBER in Shanghai. We did a research about why foreign companies are doing research and development in China. And I mean, one of the reasons was localization. Because when you develop one technology in Switzerland, in France, in Germany, whatever, and if you take this technology to China, you need to adapt, okay? Most of the time you need to adapt. You cannot duplicate, simply copy paste, okay? You need to adapt for many reasons, okay? Because consumer demand is different, because regulation is different, because the materials, the raw material you are going to use are different, okay? So you need to adapt, okay? So you need localization. That's clear. That's clear. Okay. I mean, people in marketing, they know very well. So yes, the strong advantage is that if you are Chinese, you know about the local demand. Okay. So I think it was a very strong advantage compared to Google. You know, Google started, but they have not been successful. And one of the reasons why Google was not able to take market share in China is probably that Google was at that time too much US centric. Okay, so I mean you need to adapt. I mean locally, localization.
Thank you. So basically, you're telling us we need a digital Europe. We're a long way from that, and.
Right.
The choice basically will be probably to go with the US, which makes sense. or follow the US lead. And I don't see how China will be able to really market its products, whether B2B or B2C digital products, effectively in Europe. You're saying that China has the advantage of not having to localize within its own market. That is to say, a Chinese digital product-based firm has an entire market at its disposal, ready and waiting. But that's one thing to not have to localize in China. It's another to have to localize all over the European Union or North America or South Asia or North Asia. Thank you very much for your chapter. I think it's one of the better chapters in the book just released. And we appreciate your expertise from Webster University in Geneva, Switzerland. I've known Dominique Joly for a long time. I believe you used to be at Grenoble Graduate School of Business, which is one of the leading management of technology European business school. And now you're at Webster. Thank you so much and good to see you.
Thank you,
Francesca, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I just would like to link some words of Dominique to two other chapters of our book. Dominique was mentioning some geopolitical aspects of the digital world, and I would like to say hello to two authors, Maria Papageorgiou and Fabio Cardoso, who wrote Chinese Diplomacy, Strategic Partnership and Global Economy Supremacy, that is strictly linked to these ideas that we have shared now, and to another very interesting book chapter about the semiconductor industry, a strategic look at China's supply chain by Yin Li. Yin Li could not be present today, but we will have another webinar to talk about this semiconductor strategic industry. And now we jump to another very hot industry. That is a book chapter written by John McIntyre and James Hoadley from the Georgia Tech University. And it's about Chinese commercial aircraft manufacturing policy, the view from the commanding heights. So John will present this book chapter, and then the discussant will be Risto Herrala from the Bank of Finland Research Institute for Emerging Economy. Risto is one of the authors of chapters of this book. He wrote about, can China be less dependent on exports? So we have two big authors, one commenting the other. So I give the floor to John for the presentation about aircraft.
I think, Francesca, you mean my colleague James.
James, sorry.
We do get confused. That's okay, we're used to it.
Too many John and James and Jim.
Yes.
And two Dominic.
I thought I had dodged the bullet there for a second.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let me go ahead. I have a short presentation to try and keep me on time. Let's see. Yep. I'll share my screen. Can everyone see that? I hope.
It's not in presentation mode now. Yes. Okay. Perfect. James.
All right. So we're talking about the Chinese commercial aircraft manufacturing policy, and specifically China's manufacture of commercial aircraft. So of course we got to start with the obligatory, highlights of how big the Chinese civil aviation market is. Passenger volume up until 2019 was growing. Number of civil airports, steady upward trend. And I did do some research, and I found that last year during COVID, something that we who live in Atlanta are very aware of, Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport lost its #1 position in terms of passengers handled to Guangzhou, which bolted up from number 11 on the list. Atlanta was down to 2nd. We had long been worried that Atlanta would be replaced, or we had accepted the inevitability that it would be replaced by Beijing, but the perturbations of COVID have caused a completely different airport in China to leap to the forefront. And just another indicator, if you look at the top 10, even under COVID, there are 7 airlines in China, airports in China, and 3 in the United States. One thing that the Chinese government has highlighted and is part of their overall aviation policy is that China's skies, by and large, are served by American-made and European-made aircraft, which is a major concern for China from the standpoint of domesticization. So China is attempting to build itself an aircraft industry from scratch. Now, this is not the first time that China has tried this. Way back in the 1970s, I don't want to delve on that too long, this lovely aircraft was manufactured, the Shanghai Y-10, first flew, or actually it was on the cusp of the 70s and the 80s. I think it last flew in 1983. There were only 3 made. It was reportedly a reverse engineered copy of a Boeing 707, which even by the late 1970s was quite old. And as you can see, only 3 were made. It was not successful. And it's now a very lovely museum piece, which you can now go and see once COVID restrictions are lifted. But from that lack of success, several of the things that caused that aircraft to not be successful was that that China under the regime at that time and its relationship with the world at that time could not access international suppliers for things like engines and avionics and aircraft, seat layouts and such. Today, there is much less of a restriction in that regard. So let's talk about the Shanghai Aviation Industrial Corporation, which is the ones who built the Y-10, was in existence up until the 1980s. It kind of fell apart. And in 1993, China decided that it wanted to get significantly into aviation, not simply manufacturing copies of others, but to have an aviation industry of its own. And it formed the state-owned Aviation Industry Corporation of China, or AVIC, which existed as a comprehensive corporation until 1999, when it was split into AVIC 1 and AVIC 2, with the primary purpose of AVIC 1 to produce military aircraft and AVIC 2 to produce commercial. That didn't work out as successfully as they had hoped, and so it was re-merged back together to form new AVIC in 2008. But COMAC, the Commercial Aircraft Corporation of China, was spun out to be an independent subsidiary. Now, what does independence mean in the Chinese context? It certainly isn't as free as, say, independent firms in other countries. In fact, if you look at this lovely organizational chart, you can see there is a great deal of government influence on COMAC and COMAC's decisions. The Central Committee pushes out mandates to the ministries, and the ministries implement all of these into policies, and those policies all affect and direct COMAC. So how independent COMAC is, how free COMAC is to innovate, is certainly a question that the answer is not obvious. So COMAC has managed to produce flying examples, and actually has sold one, but has produced flying examples of 2 aircraft. The first is the ARJ-21. The ARJ-21 may look familiar to those who have flown in the McDonnell Douglas MD-80 DC-9 series, and that is almost certainly intentional. MD-80 production was done in Shanghai under contract, and a great deal of know-how was learned from that. The ARJ is currently in production. It is in service with a number of airlines, I think Chengdu Airlines being the first one. It's a regional jet, and it's very clearly made only for the Chinese market, or maybe the Chinese market and smaller markets in other countries, not for the American or European markets, because its size does not match the so-called scope clauses that American and European pilot unions have negotiated with the major airlines. It's too large to fly for a regional airline, and it's too small to be of interest to a large full-size airline. it's designed to serve China, and it seems to be doing that fairly well. It also has a fairly limited range. The C919 is currently in testing and hopefully will be certified and will roll out later this year or early next year with its initial customer. It is a narrow body aircraft. It's designed to compete with the 737s and the Airbus A320s of the world, the single aisle aircraft. That actually, China again is trying to replace those aircraft on its domestic routes. But the massive failures of the 737 MAX make one wonder if the C919 has the potential to be competitive in the global sphere. But of course, COVID is reducing passenger volumes around the world. So how much demand there will be for the C919, we don't know. It is less fuel efficient than either of those, which is a huge problem currently. And then finally, the CR929, which was originally conceived as the C929, which was to compete with the Boeing 787 and the Airbus A330 long range. It's a wide body, which means it has 2 aisles in it, can seat a large number of passengers. And as you can see from the fact that there's really only models of it, it's very early stages. And additionally, while it was originally intended to be built by COMAC, it is being built by a consortium between COMAC and the Russians. That's the R of the CR929. And there's been a number of issues that make one wonder, is the CR929 even going to see the light of day? We don't know. And we're going to have to see how long distance flights return after COVID is over. So the C919 is the one that we really want to focus on. And while the C919 is designed and assembled by COMAC in China, as you can see, its components are very heavily international. American, European suppliers abound in important things like the fuel system, the engines, weather radar, all of these important components. The tail and wings, of course, are built in China. And of course, the final assembly is in China. But the C919 is it's a conscious attempt to be very similar to how Boeing or Airbus build their aircraft as a consortium of best of breed suppliers around the world. Now, the question, of course, is that a long-term investment in building these relationships, or is it an attempt to acquire know-how from those suppliers so that it can be also domesticized? And we don't know the answer to that yet either. So in conclusion, I don't know how I'm doing on time, but if I'm early, yay.
1 minute, John.
1 minute?
1 minute, yeah.
Awesome. All right, so the idea of the Chinese policy is to have Chinese-made aircraft flying in Chinese skies. It's very similar to how China has handled high-speed rail. Transoceanic aircraft, for that reason, may be a lower priority going forward, and why the partnership with Russia is being continued, because they're not necessarily sure they want to go it alone. And the overall objective may probably is to acquire long-term know-how for the future. So that's where I'm going to wrap up, and I will leave it to questions.
Thank you so much, James. This is indeed a very interesting case study because it's about value chain, global value chain, and the role of China, the changing role of China that we can see now, but we can really foresee in the future because of the massive industrial policies that are used to push these industries. So I would like to ask Risto Herrala to give a comment on this chapter. And thank you, Risto, for contributing with your chapter on China and exports, trends, and international exposure. The floor is yours,
yeah.
Risto.
Thank you very much. I hope you can see me. I myself can't, but it doesn't matter, I guess.
I see
anyway,
you, yes.
Okay. So this book chapter is a very welcome study of how the Chinese are developing their own civil aircraft industry. And the two authors, John McIntyre and James Hoadley, are very well qualified to do this, given John's extensive publication record in various aspects of Chinese industrial policy, and also James's related work. So after I figured out what the chapter was about, I think my first reaction was that it must be pretty tough to try to develop a civil aircraft manufacturing industry in today's world. So you have the COVID, of course, which has grounded most of the planes. But even before the crisis, I mean, most of the global industry was struggling with the cyclicality of the industry and the technical demands related to safety and fuel economy. And so the first, I think, things that or insights that I got from their chapter was that the Chinese are not the least bothered by such issues. So based on the party line, the state in China must have absolute control of all industries in China, including this industry. So that's the end of the discussion for them. And so they are going to build an aircraft manufacturing industry in China. So I think basically the way I take this chapter is a sort of in broad terms, a description of this battle between an immovable object, which is the Chinese state, and this unstoppable force, which is technological development in this aircraft industry. As we just saw, the authors very well described the market in China, and the numbers are very impressive. As always, when you talk about China, the number of aircraft passengers, the number of airfields being built, the number of aircraft, which are mostly Western at the moment. But I think the most interesting part of their chapter by far is their description of the various bureaucratic processes and things like this that have been put in place to try to nurture this sector into being. And so that's sort of my main lesson from this text. They also describe well that it's been a bumpy road for the Chinese. So the Chinese started already in the early 80s or even 1970s, and now they basically have two planes in the air, of which the C919 is hopefully going to be certified and flying next year, as James explained. So after reading this chapter, it will be interesting to follow how that plane will be received by the world and whether it will be useful also outside China. My main maybe question to the authors is how do they see this? Somehow I, based on the text, sensed a certain pessimism about the potential, but and James already partly explained why this is the case. But anyway, after this, I just want to thank the authors for this very interesting chapter. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have time, Francesca? Do Jim and I have time?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can reply, and
Yeah.
you can maybe include also Wensheng Zhang from our Chinese Globalization Association. Yes. There's a question from him. How do you envision the current trade war will impact China's aviation ambitions? Yeah. So maybe you can just prop up on this.
Let me also add some thoughts for Jim, and which we have really looked at for the last year. You cannot be a global power, which is China's ambition, which it is becoming, which it has become, really without having a capacity for a global aircraft industry, a transoceanic aircraft industry. It's a must. It is one of the commanding heights. But two questions come to my mind, and Jim and I have thought about it, and I'm going to let Jim answer, is first of all, the question of dual-use export controls. The United States and NATO countries have for a long time sought to limit and control the nature of technology transfer between NATO countries and potentially adversarial countries. How does one explain the role and the part played by American and European aircraft component manufacturers essential to the Chinese civilian aircraft manufacturer? It is a paradox, and I'm going to let Jim say a few words about it. We obviously have not quite resolved the question, the two of us, but we have thought about it long and hard.
Well, I think that was, oh, I'm sorry, John. Go ahead.
And then well, go ahead.
Okay.
I've already taken about 2 minutes.
I feel like the creation of, well, first I forgot to open with my killer line, which was a quote from the late Frank Zappa, which he said that in order for a country to be a country, it has to have a beer and an airline. I think that almost applies here, in that in order to be a technologically leading country, you have to manufacture aerospace. And this is why China has the Tiangong space station, why China has a rover on Mars currently, and why China is attempting to build an aviation industry to develop its position globally as a leader in domestically produced technology. As far as the export controls, I believe that's one of the motivations for spinning COMAC off from AVIC, because when it was part of AVIC, there was always this entanglement with military production. But by using so many component manufacturers that are foreign as part of its overall strategy, they needed to have an entity that could legitimately say to the world that it was not producing military focused technology. And through COMAC, I think they seem to have successfully done that, because the Trump administration attempted to block the shipment of engines and other components to the C919 and failed. So if they were unable to do so successfully, I think that their gambit of creating a separate entity has worked.
And the second question I had, which picks up on Wang Shan, is why has there not been more of a spillover between military aircraft manufacturing, in which China has done fairly well? In fact, it has just released a new military aircraft in the last 2-3 days. Why has there not been more of a spillover? Is it due to the fact that really the Chinese are giving priority to military aircraft manufacturing rather than civilian, which comes as a second at best?
Well, I think that through military aircraft manufacturing, I think first to point out is that the two types of manufacturer are quite different. They're designed for very different purposes. Military aircraft are designed to be fast, and we don't care about fuel usage, and we want to get explodey things on other far places as quickly as possible. Whereas in the case of commercial aircraft, fuel efficiency, the ability, passenger comfort, the ability to get passengers on and off and to meet international safety standards is very much a requirement. And it's a very different skill set. But I really think that in terms of China, from what we have seen in our research, that China is not really presently pushing super hard to become an exporter of aircraft yet. And that may be somewhere in the cards down the road, but they're taking a very slow, and the idea, of course, is to replace domestic air. They don't want to have to look up in the sky and see all American and European jets flying overhead. They want to see something that is their own, and that is a legitimate interest, and something that I think they have the capability to do.
Let me add, if I may, that one of the reasons James and I got very interested in the question of the Chinese civilian aircraft manufacturing capability is that we at Georgia Tech have a very important school of aeronautical and space engineering. And we view the subject as very important in terms of the research effort of our university. It is, of course, one of the central security questions in the China-US nexus. And therefore, I'm very happy to have had this collaboration with my colleague, Jim, to really try and get a handle on the subject matter. And I hope we have provided you with some of the broad outlines of questions and possible resolutions. But I'm interested, Jim, that you have concluded that China will not be a serious player on international aircraft, commercial aircraft market quite yet. My sense is that within 10 years, it will be a competitor for Airbus Industries and Boeing, not in terms of medium-range carriers, but long-term carriers. But I may regret my words.
We shall see. I will enjoy. I'm looking forward to seeing whether Chinese aircraft fill the skies or not.
Thank you, Jim. You did a great job.
Very interesting. Thank you. Thank you all. So we jump to another sector that has been affected a lot by the Chinese industrial policies in the last maybe 20 years, but the COVID-19 has pushed the attention on this sector, the life science sector that is included all the healthcare value chain. And so we jump into this very, very relevant domain of the Chinese new dream. Leapfrogging the life science sector is a chapter written by two PhD students from the University of Macerata. Now Dominique Lepore will present this chapter. Now she is a postdoc researcher. So Dominique, the floor is yours. And the comment will be from Gianluca Sampaolo, who is one of the authors of the first chapter of this book, that is a general picture of structural changes and policies in China. So this chapter explains the road toward this Chinese new dream. So I think it's perfectly done, this matching of speaker and discussant. So Dominique first and Gianluca later.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello everyone, it's a great pleasure to be here today, connected with you, introducing you to our chapter related to the life science sector in China. This chapter, as mentioned, was developed together with my colleague Noia Chen from the University of Macerata, and was actually part of an European Union Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Program called HEART, aimed at developing Internet of Things solutions for the healthcare to be applied in Europe and in China. First of all, it's worth to acknowledge that the life science sector is a critical sector to understand and fully acknowledge the impact that industrial policies in China have in terms of structural, economic, and social changes. The sector provides a wide range of solutions which are directly applied to the healthcare, including different companies. In fact, when we think of life science sectors, we can include, for instance, biotechnology, food processing, medical devices, and so on. And in the last years, the sector has been embracing the technological revolution. So the sector is applying Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, machine learning, with the objective of providing high quality and efficient services, specifically also to the healthcare domain. In a nutshell, our chapter is structured as you can see in this slide. So we analyze, first of all, the main trend that of driving the development of life science in the country, starting from the demand for data-driven business models. Then we review some of the key policies from the government that are supporting further the development of the sector. We review its global exposure. And finally, we also discuss about the implications led by the pandemic. And in particular, we name the pandemic as a wildcard. Wildcards are typically referred in foresight studies as events that have a low probability of occurring but long-lasting impact, as we well know in the case of the pandemic, since we have still the effects of this phenomenon. Lastly, at the end, we suggest a scenario analysis to fully understand which will be the next trends of life science, which is smart cities, as was mentioned previously by Professor Jolie. And in particular, smart cities are viewed as these technological digital cities based on advanced technologies that in a multi-sectoral perspective, including obviously life science, healthcare, but also other sectors as transportation and energy, are aimed at providing high quality and efficient services for citizens. Looking briefly at what you would find in this chapter in terms of content, in terms of demand, as the first trends that we review, talking about life science, we look, first of all, we try to review the complexity of the Chinese healthcare system, characterized by huge regional diversity. Also, we review the system of hospitals, which are known to be overcrowded as an effect of an aging population or a high rate of chronic diseases. And these circumstances obviously have prompted the use of Internet of Things technologies as a way to increase the value proposition of healthcare delivery. And when we refer specifically to healthcare, commonly we find Internet of Healthcare Things, specifically applying to objects connecting to the Internet that can enhance the quality of healthcare services, making them more accessible. As for governmental policies, the main ones that we review start from Healthy China 2013, introduced in 2016. This policy is particularly interesting for life science because from these policies, there is a major shift from the traditional healthcare system models based on treatment and diagnosis to the prevention model. And in fact, there is a great focus in Healthy China in terms of precision medicine, for instance, with the impact also in different sectors of life science. Another important aspect of this policy that is worth underlining is also the focus that health has, not only in terms of economic development, but for the first time, there is also the strong connection between healthcare development and ecological development, underlining the country's commitment towards sustainable development goals. Then we review obviously the 13th five-year plan, referring to the years 2016-2020, where exactly the innovation and the development of life science is viewed together with the development of Internet of Things. And this plan in particular, there is a strong focus on the biotechnology sector, which represents a great part of the growth, economically speaking, of the country. Obviously, we have to take a look also at the major industrial plan made in China 2025, where, for instance, the pharmaceutical sector is listed as a priority sector of development of the country, especially in the international level. Finally, we reviewed the new generation artificial intelligence development plan, launched in 2017, with the aim of making China a world leader in artificial intelligence. This plan is interesting, talking about life science, because there is a mention of a focus on an increasing development of smart healthcare solutions, especially looking at an aging population. Another aspect of this plan that I would like to bring to your attention is that this plan stresses the need to develop a set of norms and standards when it comes to data management, even if efforts to do so are still at initial stage of development. As for global exposure, we will have a great expectation on the positioning of China at the global level, and the companies referring to life science have transformed themselves in the last years from typical domestic companies to aggressive players at a global level. And in particular, the pharmaceutical sector, in fact, is if we consider its domain globally, China is at the second position after USA. The biotechnology industry, as I was mentioning, is a great part of the growth in terms of economic growth of the country as well. However, when we talk about investment confidence, there are the phenomena that we must consider. One was already mentioned also before in the questions, USA and China trade war, that obviously has an impact in the development of the sector, especially biotechnology, medical devices, and so on. But also, it's worth to acknowledge the recent developments in the European scenario, led in particular by the pandemic. In fact, the European Commission has introduced a screening mechanism for foreign direct investments in critical assets to safeguard public order. And this was introduced in force on April and became operational in October 2020. Obviously, the screening mechanism doesn't target specifically China, but it makes the procedural context more complex to deal with. Finally, with this wild card that I mentioned before of the pandemic, what we review is some data related to the acceleration of the digital transformation in the sector, with the usage of artificial intelligence, big data, 5G, which basically confirm this shift in the healthcare models from what I was mentioning, a typical treatment diagnosis model to a prevention kind of model, also thanks to IoT. Another aspect worth mentioning in the last period is this need also to stress the environmental friendliness of technologies linked to biotechnology in particular, and again, the country's intention to comply with the Sustainable Development Goals. In the last part of this chapter, we try to review these trends and measurements in suggesting a scenario analysis for understanding also the development of life science, which is smart cities. Considering in particular the dominant role that China is carrying in smart cities for the high rate of pilot projects, and also for the impact that the smart cities technologies have in the international markets, particularly considering cloud, drone, robots, and so on. So basically, we picture at the end a summary of what's happening and what we can imagine and what could be the future trends in terms also of research that we must consider in life science in smart cities picture in this scenario. Because as I was mentioning, smart cities don't retrieve data only on the healthcare, but also consider other sectors, transport, energy, and so on, in this multi-sectoral perspective. At the same time, they aim to provide an environment, innovative, environmental friendly, in line with Sustainable Development Goals, making sure to provide high quality services thanks to personalized model, preventive care, leveraging on the uses of Internet of Healthcare things that thanks to certain governmental policies are aimed to not only provide high quality services, but make them accessible then also to citizens. So this is the last conclusion we make, also considering the implications that smart city technologies have in terms of social and economic challenges for the USA part at the same time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dominique. You have shown many connections also with Dominique Joly's presentation, talking about the potential use of IoT within the smart cities. So talking about the life science sector, there is a huge potential for China to develop many solutions that can be also tested in the specific landscape of the digital ecosystem in China. So let's listen from Gianluca, the comments to this chapter. Thank you, Gianluca.
Thank you, Francesca, for introducing me. Thank you, Dominique, for the presentation of such a huge and hot topic in current times. After reading the chapter and the presentation and listening to your presentation, it emerges that life science industry in China has the potential to become a driver for the country's economic growth. Key policies, as you mentioned, such as Healthcare 2030 and Made in China 2025 are supporting the integration of personalized healthcare models and IoHT, which is Internet of Healthcare Things. However, several countries have tightened FDI screening mechanisms, establishing new regulations, or are planning such steps to protect their health sector and other industries that they consider as particularly important in the COVID-19 crisis. And so did the European Commission, based on the premise that the COVID-19 emergency could increase risks by acquiring healthcare capabilities and research establishment through FDI. Therefore, although progress has been made in critical infrastructure and hardware manufacturing, the potential for developing a life science industry with a strong international competitiveness is yet to realize in China. Thus, with regard to post-COVID-19 China, initiatives to support long-term growth and innovation in healthcare delivery and life science are likely to be a part of a core part of the 14th five-year plan. So my question, if it's a question, but it's like I'm inviting you to share your perspective, your point of view, considering the 14th five-year plan, which was released last March, what will future avenues for the development of life science in China be, and how will it impact the Chinese economic growth? Thank you, Dominique.
Thank you very much, Gianluca. In fact, that's an interesting question, considering that we end the chapter with expectations regarding the 14th five-year plan, because when we wrote this chapter, we could only refer to the 13th five-year plan with some insight of what could happen. So already concluding the chapter, obviously we expected that healthcare would have a central role, so life science, especially as a consequence of the dynamics led by the pandemic. And in particular, if we read the 14th five-year plan, the ambition is to build a healthy China. So obviously to focus on the public healthcare system, the medical network, looking both at the urban and rural areas. So what I was mentioning at the beginning, that huge regional diversity must be tackled, especially in the healthcare sector, as the plan also mentions in particular. Other aspects of the plan that I think are strictly related also to what I was discussing is to manage the complexity of the healthcare system. So also a reform for elderly services to improve them. More focus on preventive healthcare, and this is actually strictly linked with the pandemic. In fact, there is a need to enhance control mechanism between agencies, hospitals, to avoid and to be able to react quickly to public health emergencies like the pandemic itself. Another aspect that I think is worth mentioning is also the role that biotechnology will continue to have as one of the key strategic sectors of development of the country itself. So definitely there is much expectations in development of life science, even if, as you were correctly mentioning, there are some negative aspects and some limits to consider that could have a negative impact in terms of USA-China tensions and also European context, which has changed quickly after the pandemic. And so we still have to understand which will be the implications, for example, of this screening mechanism, which is new and which still have to be defined, because there is some degree of freedom also by the European country state members to deal with this screening mechanism. So definitely it's a key point to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominique. And thank you, John. You have a question?
Yes, I have a question. We at Georgia Tech ask a lot of questions about the future of technology and various technology industry sectors. There is an emerging consensus that in the field of healthcare delivery mechanism, life sciences, bioengineering, biomedical engineering, the US, among others, is ahead of China, and that China has not quite taken up the challenge. And that if there is one area in which the US and perhaps the European Union should cast its lot in terms of the competition that has emerged between China and the European Union and the United States, it's precisely in the area of bioengineering. And I noticed you related to smart cities. Of course, health and smart cities are intimately related, but will the Chinese ever be able to catch up? Because without a doubt, the healthcare delivery system in China is problematic. If you listen to reports of Westerners who have had healthcare in China, it's not necessarily a pleasant story. Moreover, if you look at patents and research in the field of bioengineering and biomedical fields, the Chinese have not really made the kind of progress they have in other areas, such as artificial intelligence or robotics or smart manufacturing. So what's your sense of this competition? Will the US be the leader come 2049 when the Chinese celebrate the 100th anniversary of the creation of their state?
Yeah, that's a critical aspect, obviously, to deal with, because obviously there is a dominance of USA in terms of those specific sectors. Even if China made a huge growth in years, if we just consider the growth in number of biotechnological companies, bioengineering companies. And obviously this has concerned USA because there has been, from 2018, the Committee of Foreign Investment has considered These areas in China, in particular, the acquisition and foreign investments in sensitive sectors and critical technology linked exactly and specifically with pharmaceutical and biotechnology from China. So obviously there is some concerns of what's happening in terms of relationship and that China could catch up to this. So there's been this review, there's also trade war that's concerned, for example, medical devices, while it's not concerned some other areas which are essential, like for example, basic drugs, because in this, China has still a great role. And so, for example, tariffs, trades haven't been applied to this sector. So there is a mixed position on this sense. Then obviously in China, apart from this context of USA-China, which must be monitored and which could determine also the success of this sector in the future, there is also a critical healthcare system, which is very complex. There are wide gaps and differences in the country. So we cannot imagine that just in a few years, it will quickly catch up from this. There will be great progress. Technology can help in this sense. In fact, Internet of Things, internet hospitals that have been launched during the pandemic have been a new strategy also to offer and make sure that healthcare becomes more accessible. At the same time, the technological developments of the country are very different, and so also the impact of these hospitals can be very different and must be tackled. So this all depends also on the political system that we are looking into, how the European system will react in years, which will be the consequences of the screening mechanism for foreign direct investments, specifically with China in these sectors, because this could make also the difference maybe for the development of these industries. I have also another questions that I would like maybe to address now about smart cities and how they will protect.
I was going to ask you. So.
Okay, sorry. Privacy. And well, that's a major issue. In fact, I would like maybe to bring to your attention the recent USA-China Economic and Security Review Commission that has been required by USA, which concerns specifically smart cities and the challenges that they bring in terms of not only economic development, but also in terms of privacy, data management. And there is also concern of it, also linked to the Belt and Road initiatives, because when we look at the Belt and Road initiatives, one of the strategic aspects is actually linked to smart cities technologies being developed and being also applied in international markets. So the reaction is to keep this under control, to review legislation in force and task norms that tackle data management, to be transparent and clear in what are the implications of these technologies, ensuring communication also between governments on the use of these technologies in particular. So that's a critical aspect, but that review in particular, I found it particularly interesting. We also mention it in the chapter and discuss about it. So thank you.
Thank you, Dominique. So we can now open for a few questions on all three chapters that we have discussed, but also in general terms on topics related to the use of industrial policies or the new Chinese dream. So you can raise your hand, even if you don't have a question, you just want to make maybe a contribution to the discussion, you're more than welcome.
Well, Francesca, I have some thoughts. The Chinese are notorious for proceeding by targets, by deadlines. We think of Made in China 2025. Now the next significant target, after having had the centennial of the creation of the Communist Party of China, which occurred the celebration of which occurred a few weeks ago, we're looking to 2049, which is a long time to look at, but really there are 8 or 9 major targets that China has set for itself with metrics or lack of metrics. And in view of the 8 or 9 chapters of our book, we can sort of consider these for subjects for future research. One of those targets is improving manufacturing innovation. I would say China has achieved that without a question. But then again, it was not a very hard hard thing to do. When you come from a really low level, you can only rise. And when you're big, you will rise very fast and very significantly. The second major target is integration of advanced technology into industrial process. And if you're looking at smart cars, I think Dominique, that is to say self-driven cars, Dominique mentioned that, the Chinese are doing very well. In fact, they dominate the field of car battery technology. So I would say quite a lot of achievements. Kudos to China for integrating advanced technology into industrial process. But I'm not convinced that the US and other parts of the world will not overtake China in many defined areas of technology in the field of integration of advanced technology. Number three, the goal they set for themselves was strengthening the core industrial base. Without a question, China has achieved that goal. Number four, fostering Chinese brands. If I were to ask many of our participants today, can you name more than 8 or 9 or perhaps 5 major Chinese brands? Well, I don't know, maybe we could have a majority being able to name them. But as China moves from a state-owned enterprise system to a more multinational private enterprise system, it does still have the challenge of developing global brands. Number 5, enforcing green manufacturing compatible with growth goals. China speaks well of its UN Sustainable Development Goals, but it is the major polluter in the world with the United States and the European Union, but it is that for sure. So whether it has achieved its green manufacturing objectives in industrial policy remains an open question, subject to a lot of research and controversy. Number 6, promoting breakthrough in 10 sectors of key technology. We have looked at a number of these sectors in the book. Yes, in the field of aircraft manufacturing. Yes, in the field of digital, although Dominique Joly introduced a lot of caveats to Chinese digital achievements. Number 7, modernizing the manufacturing sector's chain. Without a doubt, the Chinese industrial plant at large, the factory of the world, is really a very modernized operation today. And in that sense, they have caught up with the Rust Belt of the United States. And number 8, promoting service-oriented manufacturing and related service sectors. This is particularly relevant to Dominique Lepore's presentation on smart cities and healthcare. I wonder if China has really achieved in service-oriented manufacturing. That's an open question. I'm not convinced at all, but perhaps some of our authors here will disagree. And finally, the last of the major Made in China 2025 goals, number 3, internationalizing manufacturing. And given what our friend James Hoadley has said, I wonder if China has truly manufactured some of its key industry sectors to become a global actor. It does not appear to be the case yet in civilian long-range aircraft manufacturing. So these were the things I wanted to say in terms of the big goals, overarching goals, within which our project, which was this book, was situated. And perhaps you can answer some of these questions in the remaining 7 minutes.
Yeah, so I think, John, that in this book, we had the possibility to disclose the strength of a clear and long-term vision for a country. I mean, industrial policy yes. can give a big push to a country with several difficulties and problems that the country can encounter in the path toward the achievement of the goals that were set. But I think that in this particular moment, we have China with a clear vision, but a lot of weaknesses that we have highlighted today, but also in the book. And I just would like to read the last sentence of the first chapter that is about structural changes that China is pushing with industrial policies. This first chapter, written by Marco Di Tommaso, Gianluca Sampaolo, and Olena Liak, says, managing the economic and social sustainability of the ongoing dynamics of structural changes should be considered the main challenge facing post-pandemic China. So there was a dream set even before the pandemic, and now the pandemic has stressed the importance of social sustainability, within which the healthcare industry and life science sector has a huge central role, and also the role of economic transition towards this supremacy in key industry. So I would like to give the floor to some maybe last consideration from our public, because we have not gathered some ideas from the audience. We are 32 today. Maybe there was also the overlapping of the Olympic ceremony for opening in Japan. So some of our guests were kidnapped by the Japanese scene. Let's see if there is some question or comments also by maybe our representative from Chinese Globalization Association. I still see Wenshan or James. No.
Well, I agree with you that there is a clear vision. That is, of course, easy to achieve when you are a centralized economy driven by directives and where you really have not much dissension within the national economy as to what the goals should be. But one of the key questions of our book, Francesca, was whether or not Chinese industrial and innovation policy had succeeded. And the answer was a resounding yes. However, yes. The next question is, can Chinese industrial policy, as it has been conducted for the last 40 years, since the great reopening of China, since the recognition by the United States of the People's Republic of China, diplomatic recognition, can those kinds of policies, protectionist in nature, internally to inward, can it succeed for the balance of the century in propelling China to become, and this is the goal of 2049, the leading global manufacturing and innovation power? In a period of time when entrepreneurship driven from the bottom up is critical to really achieving significant progress in economic advancement. So the question remains, will that policy do well for China as it moves towards 2049? And it's a policy that has been criticized heavily by the United States and to a lesser extent by the European Union, because the Chinese industrial policy driven by the state, driven by the party, has been viewed and analyzed as a form of industrial aggression, violating some of the World Trade Organization rules. And of course, not surprisingly, the United States has responded by deploying a full array of tariff measures, export control laws, IP safeguard mechanism to counter what is perceived by many as unfair trade practices. So the question remains, can Chinese industrial policy, as defined by the practice of the last 40 years in achieving the 9 goals I identified, can it really carry forward, and while preserving a modicum of cooperation in the world at large between China, the European Union, the United States, and other key actors? And oddly enough, paradoxically enough, the pandemic has further solidified the digital sovereignty, national sovereignty, has further solidified what you might call technological sovereignty, the tendency to become self-reliant on the part of the Chinese. In the field of microprocessors, Dominique identified the weakness that China has, that it really relies very significantly on Taiwan, on the United States, on certain European countries, that China has not successfully, at this point, developed a truly autonomous, self-reliant microprocessor industry. And that's critical because microprocessors are embedded in just about any one of the subjects we covered today and we covered in the book. You'll find microprocessors as the driver. So can heavy-handed state guidance really promote the achievement of those goals by 2049, or is it a hindrance to private sector market signal-guided entrepreneurial economic growth for China? Question mark.
I think that the major point for China is not how the external world reacts to industrial policies developed by China. Is about internal imbalances and internal disparities. So industrial policies will be effective in the measure that China is able to cope with internal disparities. That means shows social differences within cities, differences between cities and urban areas, differences between more developed regions and less developed provinces. So it's about the capacity of China to keep sustainable growth in terms not only of environment, in terms of social cohesion and development of a strange kind of democracy for China, because China is within the Confucius umbrella. So it's used to have this kind of peculiar way of being managed. So I really think that the question mark is to be posed internally. So the capacity of the government to keep social cohesion and to widespread the benefit of economic development and social development. Now there is also another point that industrial policies that were neglected in the past were somehow left behind, now are the core of the recovery plan also in Europe. So for the first time ever, we have a European industrial policy with the Recovery EU plan. So I think that we have chosen the topic of this book very appropriately, because the topic of industrial policy is not hot only in China to understand the future of China. Industrial policies are central now in Europe debate. We are discussing these days about the Italian, for example, resilience funds. We have receiving huge amount of funds, and we are developing in a Chinese style 5-year plan in all kind of strategic industry, including education and university. So I don't have a clear answer to your question, but I see the key point of internal problems that China has to solve.
It's paradoxical that China has really pushed us back in the West, quote unquote West, towards a more traditional approach to managing our future in the field of economic affairs.
If I may express an opinion, I think that we have looked internally. The book, of course, is entitled The China Dream, and we're looking at it internally from the perspective of China. But I think globally, China, of course, has many issues that need to be dealt with, and I don't want to gloss over those or ignore those. But putting those aside for a second, if China becomes a global competitor in a number of key sectors, that I think can only benefit the world. Perhaps because I'm looking at it through the lens of aviation. Currently, global aviation is commercial aircraft manufacturing is dominated by 2 manufacturers. That's a duopoly. That's not competition. So bringing in a quality competitor, I think, can only benefit everyone, because it will force the others to up their game as well, rather than fall into just more of the same stuff.
Excellent point. It's funny to justify Chinese protectionism and industrial policy by pleading for global competition. It's a paradox of the modern day, I guess.
So we want to see the US plan for the next 5 years. Indeed, I'm sure that you have.
Well, I mean, the US is, in terms of infrastructure, there are major proposals that are somewhat in the nature of industrial and innovatory policy. I mean, if you look at the Biden administration, it's a pretty broad range of sectors that are being targeted, from education to optical fiber, to road building, bridge building, you name it.
Yeah, so I think that we can bring this discussion also to the next China Global Conference in October, because it's a hot topic ranging from China to Europe to the US. So it's a very global issue. So, John, I think that we have run out
Yes.
of time. So
I think we have.
yeah,
I want to
4
say
minutes.
congratulations to Francesca for pulling off a coup, the creation of Villa Lauri, which is a wonderful palatial mansion now open to house the China Center of the University of Macerata.
I invite you all for the next not webinar, seminar in present. So I really want you to come to Italy and discuss about China in this wonderful place. So I think that we can, we have to close the webinar. I would like to thank all the other authors that could not speak today because we had to select some topic. We will have another webinar, and of course the China Goes Global conference happening in end of October. So I just want to invite you to follow us in our website and Facebook for the updates. And let's keep in touch. And if you are interested in our book, you can find in the Palgrave Pivot series in the website that here is reported. And let me once again say thank to John for leading and guiding me in the editing of this book. It's been an amazing experience that I share with you, John. And I also would like to thank Marin Marinov and Svetla Marinova for hosting this book in their series. So thank you, Marin, that is here with us today. John, the floor is yours for final remarks.
Well, we hope you really look at the book, give us some feedback, and help us define the next topic for our next conference or webinar or workshop. The Chinese Globalization Association has been very active on these subjects since really 2004. So really we were among the first really to pursue a deeper understanding of what China meant for the rest of the world in terms of competition, in terms of potential conflict, but also hopefully collaboration in certain key areas. So we thank you all, and particularly thanks to our friend at Macerata for really leading the webinar today and providing the technology and the organizational support. Thank you. Goodbye.
Dominique,
have a great day and a great weekend.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye bye.
Ciao a tutti. Ciao ciao.